Hello everyone, today I'm going to be explaining about the topic reproduction in living organisms, class 10 science CBSE. So first let's know what is reproduction. Reproduction is the ability of living organisms to produce new individuals similar to them like other essential life processes, nutrition, respiration, growth and excretion. Reproduction is not essential to maintain life of an individual. Now let's see what is the importance of reproduction. The importance of reproduction is continuation of life on earth, addition of new species, replacement of dead organisms, transfer of adaptations and variations from one generation to another. The basic event in reproduction is the creation of a DNA copy. Various organisms use different modes of reproduction depending on their body design. Mainly there are two types of reproduction, that is asexual and sexual reproduction. Before we talk about types of asexual reproduction, now let's see what is asexual reproduction. The process is very common in unicellular organisms. It is said to be the simplest type of reproduction. For example, binary fission in amoeba, budding in hydra, spore formation in rhizopus, fungus, and vegetative propagation in flowering plants like rose, etc. Now let's see what are the characteristics of asexual reproduction. It is a rapid mode of multiplication. Cell division takes place either mitotically or emetotically. The new individuals produced after cell divisions are always genetically identical or cloned to their parents. A single parent is involved, thus opposite sexes are not involved. It does not involve the fusion of gametes. Now let's see the first type of asexual reproduction, that is binary fission. It is a type of fission where the parent organism divides into two identical daughter organisms with a definite orientation. At first, the nucleus of cell divides into two. It is followed by division of the cytoplasm. Then finally, splitting of parent cell into two daughter cells occurs. Some unicellular organisms show more organization of their bodies. Thus, for example, Leishmania, Clostridium, or Kala-Azar, which have a V-like structure at one end of the cell. In such organisms, binary fission occurs in a definite orientation in relation to the cell structure. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is budding. It is a type of asexual reproduction where a daughter organism is formed from a small projection known as a bud. It develops as an overgrowth due to repeated cell divisions of the parent body. When fully grown, it deattaches to grow into an independent individual. For example, Hydra. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what are the advantages of budding. There are three advantages of budding, that are efficient reproduction, genetic uniformity, and resource conservation. I like you all to look at this slide. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what are the limitations of budding. There are two limitations of budding, that are lack of genetic diversity and competition for resources. So I would like you all to look at this slide. Now let's go to the next. So there are three advantages of asexual reproduction, that is speed. Here asexual reproduction is a rapid mode of reproduction. There's no need for a gametes and a mate in this type of asexual reproduction, and it is suitable for stable environments. Now I would like to ask you all to look at the slide. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what are disadvantages of reproduction. There are two disadvantages of asexual reproduction: lack of genetic diversity and vulnerability to environmental changes. Now I would like you all to look at this slide. Now let's go to the next slide. What is sexual reproduction? So now let's see what is sexual reproduction. So, in this type of reproduction, both sexes, as male and female, are involved. Sex cell from one parent male fuses with the sex cell of another parent female. This results in production of a new cell called zygote. Thus, if the zygote has to grow and develop into an organism with highly specialized tissues and organs, then it has to have sufficient energy for doing this. Simple organisms have almost similar size of germ cells. that are not very different from each other, whereas in complex organisms the size of germ cell varies greatly. In these organisms, the germ cell with larger food stored is known as a female gamete. The other germ cell, which is smaller and motile, is known as male gamete. Thus, the sexual mode of reproduction involves two major processes, that is formation of gametes by meiosis and fusion of gametes. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what are the disadvantages of sexual reproduction. There are three disadvantages of sexual reproduction, that is slow reproduction, need for a meat and resource intensity. Now I would like you all to take a look at this line. Now let's see the characteristics of asexual reproduction. As I have told you all earlier, uh, it is a rapid mode of multiplication. Cell division takes place either meiotically or ameiotically. The new individuals produced of the cell divisions are always genetically identical or cloned to their parents. A single parent is evolved, thus opposite sexes are not involved. It does not involve the fusion of gametes. Now let's go to the next slide. So there are many types of asexual reproduction. We have discussed in the previous slides about binary fission and budding. Now in the upcoming slides we'll discuss about multiple fission, fragmentation, regeneration and vegetative propagation. Now let's see what is multiple fission. The type of fission where the parent organism divides into many identical daughter organisms at the same time. Multiple fission can be seen in organisms such as Plasmodium, etc. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is fragmentation. It is a type of asexual reproduction observed in multicellular organisms with a relatively simple body organism like filamentous algae, that is Spirogyra. On maturation, it breaks up into two or more small fragments or pieces. Each fragment subsequently grows to form a complete new organism. This process occurs under favorable conditions of moisture, temperature and nutrient availability. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is regeneration. Okay. Now let's see regeneration. It is a type of asexual reproduction in which the development of a new organism occurs from just a broken or cut part of a parent organism. This is carried out by specialized cell which profilately and makes large number of cells. From this mass of cells, different cells now undergo changes to become various cell types and tissues to make a full organism. Animals like Hydra and Planaria can regenerate into a complete individual from a single segment of their body part. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what are the differences between fragmentation and regeneration. Fragmentations, organisms that are fragmented result in each fragment growing into an individual organism. Regeneration occurs when an organism only regrows a lost limb or any other part of the body. Fragmentation, a new individual emerges from each fragment. Regeneration, no new organisms are formed. Fragmentation, only a few organisms can fragment and form new individuals. Regeneration, all organisms exhibit the ability to regenerate only to some degree. Fragmentation is observed in organisms such as flatworms and sponges. Regeneration, scissors can regenerate their tail part. Now let's go to the next slide. We have seen about the budding. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is spore formation. In many multicellular organisms, tiny blob on a stick-like structures are involved in reproduction. These blobs are known as sporangia, which contain spores as reproductive structures. Thus, spore formation is also a type of reproduction. It's also a type of asexual reproduction. Here, living cells or spores have the ability to germinate and give rise to new colony of daughter organisms. The spores are covered by thick walls that protect them in unfavorable conditions. When the spore come into contact with some moist surface like soil, they begin to grow. The thread-like projections called hyphae develops on the moist bread if it's kept in open for a few days. This is because the spores of Rhizopus present in the air settle down on the bread and germinate to form new Rhizopus colony. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is vegetative propagation. It is a type of asexual plant reproduction in which new plants are obtained from a part of the parent plant. Under favorable conditions, various structures take part in this type of reproduction. This is also known as natural vegetative reproduction, where plants like roots, stem and leaves develop into new plants. The property of vegetative propagation is used in cutting, layering and grafting. These are known as methods of artificial vegetative propagation. They are used for many plants like sugarcane, roses, grapes, etc. by farmers. Now let's go to the next slide. There are four types of artificial vegetative propagation. They are cutting, grafting, layering and tissue culture. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see cutting. A part of a plant, specifically a stem or leaf, is cut and planted in the soil. These cuttings are sometimes treated with hormones to induce root development. The new plant is formed from the adventitious roots developing from the cutting. For example, rose plant. Now let's go to the next slide. Grafting. In this, the plant from some other plant is attached to the stem of a plant rooted in the ground. The tissues of the graft become integrated with the tissues of the rooted plant and develop as a single plant over a time. Now let's see some examples of grafting. Two examples of grafting are apple and mango. These two plants are grown through grafting. Now let's go to next slide. Now let's see what is layering. In this, the stem of the plant is bent to the ground and covered with soil. Adventitious roots emerge from the plant parts covered with the soil. This attached stem with developing roots is known as layer. Now let's see some examples of it. So jasmine and mint are artificially propagated by the process of layering. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see what is tissue culture. In this, the plant cells are different parts of plants are cultured in the laboratory to develop a new plant. This technique is helpful in increasing the number of rare and endangered plant species that are unable to grow under natural conditions. Now let's see some examples of it. Yeah. The examples of tissue culture are oil palm, banana, eggplant, pineapple, rubber tree, tomato, sweet potato, etc. So they have been produced by tissue culture in the developing countries. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's see the advantages of sexual reproduction: genetic diversity, adaptation to changing environments, repair of damaged genes. So now let's see what are the process of sexual reproduction: gametogenesis, fertilization and genetic diversity. These are the three processes of sexual reproduction. I request you all to take a look at this slide. Now that's all for this video. So here I was only able to explain you the asexual reproduction in deep. In the upcoming video I'll tell about sexual reproduction, about sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and sexual reproduction in human beings. Thank you.